John Gattuso with Gattuso Development Partners. Design is really central to our mission. We are really all about creating high-performance work environments for our customers and doing so in a way that is invigorating, that helps those firms attract the best caliber talent, that creates a work environment where people feel comfortable, where they actually want to go as opposed to being compelled to go. This is the kind of product that we end up engaging with our customers to create, and design is absolutely central to achieving and doing that successfully. Philadelphia is such a unique city in the United States, and it has such a great reservoir of historic architecture, and most notably recognized by UNESCO in the last few years as being a World Heritage City. We would be, I think, making a grave mistake if we let that heritage disappear from our presence by not really paying attention to the preservation and really maintaining that built environment in a way where it can continue and endure and live on. We as a society start to have a great expectation for our public built environment. We seemingly have raised the right to be ugly to a constitutional right. And really, when we think of our public realm, when we think of our public buildings, that really speaks to all of us as a commonwealth. Restoring those buildings to a position of quality and of prominence, I think, is central to us as a society. Bill Rouse once said that the difference between an average architect and a spectacular great architect was simply the number of great ideas they had in a given week. And I think by reaching out and having the opportunity to work with some really talented architects over the last several decades has meant that we were really exposed to some really incredible thinking, some great ideas. It really expanded our vision of what could be, and it, I think, has paid a tremendous dividend to the kind and quality of projects that we've been able to undertake. Gattuso Development Partners is a proud supporter of the Louis I. Kahn Award.
Good evening. It's great to be back in this hall. I'm not sure whether when the University Museum gets renovated, whether we'll want to go back or not. I think we'll have to take a vote on that. Anyway, it's wonderful to see this hall filled. I'm Bill McDowell, chair of the Center for Architecture's Louis Kahn Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the 34th Annual Louis Kahn Memorial Talk. The Center for Architecture is proud to continue this remembrance of the rich legacy of the educational and architectural leadership of Louis Kahn. His work and teaching had an enormous impact on generations of architects and continues to this day. We're thrilled this year to honor the firm of Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro, and so happy to have partners Liz Diller and Ben Gilmartin here tonight to accept this honor on behalf of their firm. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I would like to thank our sponsors. No evening like this comes about without the help of sponsors. Behind me is the list of our Esherick level sponsors. These sponsors, many of whom have sponsored the Kahn Memorial Lecture for numerous years. These organizations believe in the importance of good design and improved quality of our built environment. Thank you very much to all of them. I'd also like to thank our media partner, WHYY, our Richards level sponsors, Clemens Construction, Steve Poppert, always a supporter, Miller Macris, Sutton and Seiden, Rich Davies, thank you very much, and the Rockwell Group. I would specifically like to mention our Salk level sponsor this year, Steve Gendler, who is a co-founder of MIS Capital, along with David Coleman. MIS is a development company whose mission is to develop financially successful projects in environmentally sustainable ways, and most importantly, contributing to the quality of life for the communities in which these developments take place. Steve is also on the board of the Center for Architecture and continues to make significant contributions to its mission. Thank you, Steve. Please stand. Our presenting sponsor this year is Gattuso Development Partners. John Gattuso, a leading member of Philadelphia's development community, has personally been a supporter of this event for the last 20 years. John has been involved in some of the most complex, transformative projects in the city's history that literally shape Philadelphia's skyline. John, thank you for your dedication to achieving the highest standards in architecture and urban design. Please stand. Tonight's program is not only a fun social and educational event, but also serves as a fundraiser to support design education for Philadelphia's K-12 students, both at the Charter High School for Architecture and Design, CHAD, and through the Center's Architecture and Education program. CHAD's mission is to improve our region by educating young people about the transformative ability of design to shape their lives and communities, and in the process to help diversify the architecture and design community. We're thrilled to be supporting that event again this year. We are so thrilled to have all of you here on what is going to be a remarkable presentation. And now to introduce tonight's firm honoree, I would like to invite to the stage the Executive Vice President and CEO of the American Institute of Architects National Organization, Robert Ivy. Thank you very much, Robert, for being here tonight.
Good evening. Gosh, how wonderful to see this magnificent hall filled with so many people out for architecture. It's thrilling. I want to thank the Center for Architecture and Design for what you're doing with this Kahn Award. Louis Kahn obviously is internationally renowned, and the thought of linking his heritage with contemporary architecture is fitting and appropriate. This is at a time that I think generally we as architects and as let's say the community of architecture lovers are trying to raise and heighten the value and relevance of architecture for the general public so that they hear more about it and understand it. There actually is a thirst for it. And how wonderful that we have Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro as the honoree tonight, because their work not only tickles the architects, but it tickles the public too. In fact, much of it is aimed at those people who are actually going to inhabit the places and experience the experiences that they have conceived and worked with others to produce. I want to say one word about the AIA, which is enjoying its 150th anniversary this year. This is remarkable. The national organization was founded in 1857, and the Philadelphia chapter followed very soon thereafter and produced, think about it, the number of distinguished architects that arose in this city alone. And just recently, Bob Venturi had a memorial service here. You follow that lineage back and think how many people have been moved and changed, and how the field of architecture has evolved because of the personalities and the place, and the places that still remain. You know that this year's Kahn Award is being presented to Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro. Founded in 1981, this studio is not like most others, I think it's fair to say. Its practice combines a variety of motives and combines them often in a single project, whether it's architecture, urban design, installation, a variety of other motives and ways of presentation. Their work looks at culture, and it also looks at the city, I think, and it has done so not only in New York City, but now around the world. And we're going to hear about some of those I hear from Liz just in a few moments. There are over 100 of them present in this studio today. And it was my pleasure to watch them in New York as they grew and evolved and soaked up the city. And in fact, would sit in an audience and really try to understand technology, to try to see what the city and how it would change. And they've done that. They've made that in the places and the projects that they've made. They've been widely praised, and I won't go through the litany of the awards. You can read those on Wikipedia if you so choose. But they include things like the MacArthur Grant, which does not go to everyone, and they have used wisely. The American Academy and Time Magazine's leaders, and so forth. I think less than the awards than tonight and what we're about to hear. I think, though, it is worth saying a word or two about their work. I observed it, as many of you have, both from afar and in the present. And here's some of the words that I use when I think about their work. I think part of what they do is enrich human experience, and that many architects can do if we take the intellectual effort and the energy to do so. I think they also do something that many architects hope to do, and that is to free our imagination, to go somewhere that it had not been before or thought to do. And they've done that through real projects. Here's one that caught my eye, and I would call it immersion. It was the Blur project that appeared in the year 2002, and if you remember it, it was a project whose walls were essentially fog. Think about that. It was a pavilion placed in Lake Neuchâtel, and it made a statement, and it was a statement, I think, that was multivalent. It showed that place can actually be transient, that our definitions are not hard-edged, but in fact can change and move much as nature moves. And yet it was fixed in that lake. I think particularly, and in the way that many of their projects work, it engaged all of our senses, including the sense of touch, taste, smell, all together in this sort of mist-enshrouded pavilion in the lake. Another thing that I think that they do is throw light. Part of what they do with ideas and places is reveal. Sometimes it means tearing away a scrim and allowing us to see inside a place that we only hoped to be able to do. And they've done that at Lincoln Center, for instance, where we can look up and see what's actually going on inside. Sometimes they reverse that process and look from the inside out, as they did at the ICA Center in Boston, where the harbor actually becomes the backdrop for work inside the project itself. And then we'll hear more about the High Line, which I hope every one of you has taken part in. And I think there, that light, that throwing light, is actually transformative. It's transforming human experience by changing perspective. It's taking something that's pre-existing and looking at it in a new and radically different way through movement and placement in space. And so we see the city in a different way. I think many people appreciate New York in a way that they never could have before. In some cases, they veil projects. The Broad Museum in Los Angeles is covered in a sort of wonderful veil that sets this apart and yet makes it part of the city of Los Angeles. The shed that Liz will be talking about is their most recent and most visible new piece of construction, and it speaks to change, obviously, transience, if you will, impermanence, and that cultural institutions do not necessarily have to be fixed objects. Many of us, for instance, have experienced museums as four walls, and in this case, the walls are three, and they roll. So we're able to move as culture moves and changes. And in fact, that is the case with modern life today. We are less fixed than we are mutable and capable of having different perspectives and points of view. Every case, a fresh perspective. They cause us to smile. They cause us to take notice in ways that we might not have before, to react, if you will, to explore, to look inside ourselves, and to think. And with that thought, Liz Diller, please join me up here and open our eyes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bob, for the beautiful introduction. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, the Center for Architecture. To utter the name of our studio along with Lou Kahn in the same breath is mind-blowing. So it's a great honor for us to receive this award. And I speak on behalf of Ben and my partner, Ben, and my other two partners, and the 100 or so misfits that work in our studio that do the crazy work. Thank you so much. So what I wanted to do today was to talk about something that is very present in my mind, and just because it's raw and it's sort of concentrated in one place. And I wanted to talk, well, architects, if anything, we're control freaks. And, we like to control everything from design to costs, we try, schedules, but we can't exactly control what happens with our work. After it gets done, we can't really control the way it's inhabited ultimately. And so while we're, or many architects are megalomaniacal, we can only control very little ultimately. And so this unintended consequences, which sort of happens, and we have to, I've learned to sort of relax and appreciate that the lives of our work just continue, or our work takes on many lives, of which we can control some. And the area I want to talk about is just right there in the highlight. It's where our studio is, and it's where a lot of our work has been concentrated. And for some reason, many architects don't get to work in their own cities, and so what happens is you sort of get invited someplace else, and you build your reputation, and then at some point in your life, usually when you're older, out of pity, they invite you back, and then you do something. And in our case, it was very, very different. We just got a lucky break in New York, and then it led to another lucky break, and then into helping to do some of the sort of very large projects in New York, of which I'm not going to show you, like Lincoln Center or MoMA, things like that. I'm going to show you just that one corner of the world. I'm also really, really happy about this, to hear about this program, this high school program, or K through 12, I guess. And if I had been introduced to architecture at that age, I might have started earlier. But we sort of got a late start, so that's just a detail. But it's great as an educator to hear that students at a young age will be exposed to architecture. Okay, so a couple of non sequiturs there. So this is this area of New York, which includes the High Line, and the High Line. We began in 2004, and this was a totally transformative project. It's a 1.5 miles of obsolete industrial railway, and it fell into disrepair. And because of the urgency of these property owners all around this area of the High Line in Chelsea and Meatpacking District, the mayor of New York at that time, Giuliani, ultimately signed the court order to demolish the High Line. And it was because the developers around felt that it devalued their property. So he's been wrong about other things before. And this is, the kind of literature that has been around, like at that time, stop the nonsense, make this unsightly abandoned railroad track, take it down today. I mean, it was hard to imagine, and what was around the High Line, the area was industrial, and it was home to sex work, and there was a lot of trans stuff, and there were a lot of meat in all the different ways that you might think of it. But it was sort of on its way out of New York because the meatpacking district was dissolving, and the train had seen its, I think, last ride in 1980. So the whole area sort of was overgrown, and I won't go into the whole history of the High Line and the whole project, but we're still, it's like, doing a linear project is incredible because we started this in 2004. We're still adding pieces. We just opened the spur on 30th Street, just over 10th Avenue, and it's like these sausage links that you just, if you have a little bit more money, you just do a little bit more, and then you have a little bit more money and do some more. So it's been really like that, just been growing from south to north. These guys are the citizen activists that came up with the idea to transform the High Line into a public park. And they were able to, so before Giuliani signed the court order, they were able to start convincing people that this would be a great idea. And this is just, they met at a community board meeting, and they didn't know each other, and they just thought, well, you had that idea, I had that idea, let's work together. So Josh David, Robert Hammond, the true heroes of the High Line. So the High Line was argued, again, coming back to real estate values, was argued as a kind of a catalyst for development of the West Side, which was largely abandoned in a sea of open parking lots at that time. By 2000 something, it was really forlorn, and as the Central Park was argued by Frederick Law Olmsted, that park right there would help the city grow northward. It was really the same argument that was used, because there always has to be a good economic argument for a public, civic thing, like a park. And so this was the transition from mayor to mayor. And as soon as Bloomberg came into office, he reversed the court order, and the High Line was saved, at least provisionally, until we were then hired. It was an international competition. We were hired, and we had a vision for it, which was really very, very simple, and it was to sort of use the DNA that was already there. Anyway, it took a while for this city to be entirely convinced. That's what grew there. We were just sort of in love with this accidental ecosystem and it was just flora and fauna. And it just came from years of neglect. And so the big challenge was how to bring the public up into this otherworldly place without ruining it. So anyway, fast forward, we opened the High Line, and it's with James Corner, Field Operations, who teaches at Penn, and he was our partner in this project, and Pute Udolf, the horticulturalist, was also a partner. And so a great team, and there's one sort of very, very basic premise here, that vegetation and humans participate in the same space, and rather than having one edge for the green stuff and hardscape in one place for the humans, it's blended together, it's combed together into these unlikely combinations, and sort of presenting parts of New York that were not necessarily meant to be seen from these angles. Lots of party walls. And the vegetation is just great. And we used a lot of what was there already to just transform it with, a small touch to maybe defamiliarize something that's sort of obvious, perhaps. So one of the reasons I think the High Line has been so successful is that New Yorkers discovered on the High Line that they could actually do nothing. You can't really do much on the High Line. You can't ride a bike, for example. You can't bring your dog. You can't throw frisbees or balls. You really can't ride rollerblades. You can basically sit or walk. And that notion of doing almost nothing was something that was like a huge adventure for New Yorkers, because we're always so productive. We're always like working, and when we're not working, we're burning calories, and when we're not burning calories, we're on our devices, or we're shopping. We're always doing something. So this sort of nothingness was even taken one more step in this sunken overlook, which is over 10th Avenue. It's south of the spur, which just opened. And simply we just cut a hole into the structure and put some glass in where there was steel at the edge, and we allowed the public to beside just sit and watch traffic. And it's really, really popular. And the traffic, this is not taken from the right vantage point, but it really just goes down 10th Avenue and into this, it's like a contemporary lava lamp of sorts. It just keeps going and going, and then, stops for a red light and then keeps going. But there were a lot of things that happened there that we planned for, and we got that right. But there are a lot of things that we had no idea what we were doing, and the public, has really embraced the High Line, sometimes more than we would want. But there's all sorts of activities there, like stargazing. Astronomers meet there. There are classes, yoga classes. I don't know what that is, but a lot of stuff happens there. The Topless Poets Society, sitting right on that spot. And among the many things that happened that we could not have planned for, is this kind of really interesting condition. It's on a tenement building on 20th Street. So in the very first chapter of the building of the High Line that finished in 2009, there were gates right across the High Line, right next to this building. And there was a construction light that was just sort of happened to be unfocused. It should have been on the High Line, but it was just sort of, facing this building, and it was highlighting this particular apartment in this tenement. And the woman that lived behind those windows decided to take advantage of this spotlight that came for free, and she invited her friend, who is a cabaret singer, to come out and sing every night for what was this audience that would just assemble on the High Line by chance. And this sort of is connected to something that was very inspiring for us that will come up in a moment. I'll talk about it. But this Renegade Cabaret, was ultimately was illegal and disbanded. But it was like a great thing that there was a story behind every window, actually, and everything was so naturally theatrical. But other things that happened at the High Line that were unanticipated was how quickly it became like a cultural pop icon, and it sort of started appearing on TV, in comic books. Like, this is the absolute, sign of achievement that, like, what else can you hope for? But to be on The Simpsons. But also it's a place for photo shoots and film shoots and so forth. And then there was this High Line perfume that is totally, I don't know, and I'm going to read what it says here. It says, "The scent of wildflowers, green grasses, and urban renewal." That's the way it's advertised. Someone came up with this idea. We cannot, actually, the name High Line can't be copyrighted, so anybody could make anything. And they're also making this High Line pot, basically, this cannabis. High Line haze, and so many other products and names of things. So among the unexpected is the attendance. So when we initially argued for the High Line in its very early days, we anticipated something like 400,000 people could come every year. And last year, 8 million people visited the High Line. So that was totally unexpected. And as a result of the High Line, and this is something I'm super proud of, that the High Line has inspired cities all over the world to do something similar. And the High Line isn't the first. The Promenade Plantée in Paris was the first and was the model. We actually took members of the city there to prove that you can have an elevated park. But somehow the High Line really sort of caught the imaginations of policymakers, leaders all over the world. And, I can't count really how many there are. I don't know, maybe 150 or more types of parks, now linear parks that are in design or nearly finished, that take on this this notion. And I think that we touched on two things sort of inadvertently. One, well, maybe it wasn't inadvertent, that there was this piece of obsolete infrastructure that cost a lot to demolish. And why not just repurpose it? So that was one thing that was, in a time of limited resources, use the resources that are already there. But it also touched a nerve, I think, because we're all so, addicted to our screens, and the importance of public space is still there, maybe more than ever. And so it touched a nerve there. So there are high lines that are all over the earth, and even here, and this is someplace in Latin America, that even on a weekend on a highway, that AstroTurf is rolled out, and people just gather and walk. So as a kind of inadvertent result of the High Line came an invitation to do another park, sort of like the High Line, but not exactly. So it was initially it was to participate in an international competition for a major park in Moscow, and this park happens to be next to the Kremlin, right next to St. Basil's Cathedral and Red Square. So super loaded site. And for a long time, we were conflicted about even competing in this. This was during the Ed Snowden period, where the relations between the US and Russia were very tense. And we were really thinking, should we take this on? Should we do this competition? It's for the city of Moscow. It's not for the regime. And we decided to participate in the competition. And in the end, I'll show you what happened, what transpired. But a little something about the site. So this site is it's an amazing site. It's actually, I'll read a little bit. It was abandoned by affluent nobles when Peter the Great moved the capital to St. Petersburg in 1712, and following the fire of Moscow, so there's a little bit of history. In the fire of Moscow in 1812, it became the site of the city's largest Jewish enclave. And after the 1880s, while Russian Jews emigrated, Zaryadye, the name of this area, remained a quarter for cheap housing. And then after 1917, after the October Revolution, Stalin wanted to build a skyscraper on the site, much like the Seven Sisters, and it was intended to be used by the People's Commissariat of Heavy Machinery. So, in the end, what ultimately happened, so none of that happened, but it was the site for a Khrushchev-era hotel called the Rossiya Hotel. And it was built between 1964 and 67, and it was completed under Brezhnev. And it's 3,000 rooms. It's a really crazy, huge footprint, horrible hotel. And it was raised in 2006. And actually, Norman Foster made a proposal to develop. The site was to be developed commercially. And I don't know what quite happened. That project was stopped, and then the city got involved and decided to build a park there. And the city architect is Sergei Kuznetsov, who's a really brilliant city architect. And I wish we had a city architect in New York. We need those kind of people that really have the interest of the city in their minds, in terms of planning. So we proposed, so this was an international jury. It was pretty intense. Everyone told us, do not enter that competition. An American does not stand a chance. And we did, well, that just entices us to even, prove them wrong. And the principle was what we called wild urbanism, which was a hybrid landscape where the natural and the built cohabit into a new kind of public sphere. And so there was always the issue of blending this sort of wildness in with the city. And there's a whole sort of theory of the city and and the park in the city and the wildness that really the city sort of protects us from wildness, but we really love wildness and we love to cultivate it, And so this park was based on and here's a plan. So it doesn't really look like a typical Russian park, and in a Russian park there are always axes, and you can use one of 4 different kinds of species of flowers, rose bushes, or it's very limited. We decided, like the Highline, that we were going to use a variety of native species from all around Russia. And so we have the wetland, the forest, the tundra, and the steppe climate. And it was to be, quite natural, and the way that the park would come together. It would also be pathless. It would be unscripted movement. And so this is, part of it's very unfamiliar to Russians to actually be on the grass. It's always stay off the grass. So inviting the public to sort of meander and use the site was really unusual. And these are some of the, and we worked with Hargraves as our landscape architect. It's really a great collaboration. And we produced topography on the site. So we used these different, 4 different sort of sites of different vegetation. And then we sort of cross-cut them into a topography and buried a lot of the structures that we needed to have on site, sort of folded into the landscape. And we also experimented with augmented climate to be able, because in Russia, very severe long winters, we wanted to extend the shoulder season of the summer and fall. And we wanted to, sort of play with the temperature using passive systems. Another thing is, and this is very much like the Highline, the paving system and the way the paving and the vegetation are blended together to sort of comb together and here I want to point out one really important thing, that in the brief for this project, it was stated that there should be no space where the public could collect. And so we said, we don't want to do that. We want to do just the opposite. And so we produced these large areas where the public could collect together. Anyway, nevertheless, we won the project, and maybe they have second thoughts, I don't know. But it was also meant to take, some of these incredible sites that are monuments in Moscow, and rather than just expose everything around the site, we would control the views. So we would hide and expose various different views at different moments as you move through the landscape. And you could see the topography is all, man-made, actually. We had to dig into the underground where there were parking garages, and underneath there was the KGB tunnels. It was very difficult to get underground plans. That's a whole other lecture. But anyway, on the thermal side, we're playing around with these augmented climates. So now we won the competition in construction, and here it is as it opened. And you could see some of the monuments all the way around, and I'll just sort of breeze through some of the this big boomerang. We could not bring the public out past all those lanes of traffic that are by the river. So, there was just no way legally to do that. But we brought the public out there over the river nevertheless. All of these species trees, this is all new. There was nothing there before. And the topography and the paving system. Sometimes the paving just sort of got extruded up into seating. And this crust, this is kind of one of the interesting features of the augmented climates. We made a hill, and that hill is the roof of a concert hall by another architect. And the glass crust just hovers over that hill. And the idea is that in the winters, that the glass could absorb a lot of solar gain, and we could keep the grass green just underneath there. So here's, so it's quite a bit warmer above, just because warm air rises, and so we're able to sort of have a sort of warm area there. You could see the concert hall underneath. And so this is the space, which is open air, and you can come there and just walk up the hill and roll down the hill. And here it is in the winter, so you could see the snow outside, and it's still green on top, so it works. And then the bridge, and seasonal. It's really quite lovely there. And so then we had a unexpected visitor. So I have to say that, like, I don't know how things happen in Russia. Maybe he was always involved. We never really knew that he was involved. He decided to take credit for the park afterwards. This is him on his first visit. First he saw the model, and that's the mayor. And then he went around, he drove around in his little golf cart. He looks really bored there, doesn't it? He's like, anyway, that was really unsettling. But anyway, the first month, there were 1 million visitors to the park. And it was like an instant success. And then this is the Putin's paradise. Now, it's bizarre. It's bizarre when credit, like, so somehow, American architects got away with doing this thing. Putin takes the credit, and then there's a national stamp. And it becomes this sort of this place where people are very familiar. It's very romantic, and people are really, really enjoying the park, like a lot, to a point where these kind of articles are starting to pop up. Feral animals, and so apparently, if you get caught, you get 15 days in jail. And, we think that this is a sign of success, actually, that people are so comfortable there that, they're just enjoying it. And all of a sudden, it's like the American architects that, ruin the youth of Moscow. So anyway, whatever. What was so interesting about this project was that, we found ourselves sort of with this interesting sort of ethical problem. Do we engage the project, or do we shy away from it? And we decided to engage it as urbanists and as people that are truly interested in cities, and the city of Moscow is really cosmopolitan. We wanted to make a contribution to the city. And, and I still believe that regimes come and go, architecture, parks, they're there for good. And, so far, so good. Anyway, I wanted to sort of like get back to, so that was like a little departure for a moment from the High Line, because it turns out that the High Line was also a place for romance and for, it was like the place where everyone had their first dates when it first opened, and then the Standard Hotel, which is built right over the High Line, was a place of performance. And a willing public, and whatever. It was consensus on both sides, but it is a place for romance. And there's something about these parks and these structures that just have had this effect. And maybe it was something that we never expected, and we should think about that. And it led to real proposals. Actually, we found some things on the internet, lots of marriages on the High Line. So legitimate. And those guys, I have no idea. That isn't the most beautiful wedding picture, is it? Okay, but in terms of inadvertent things that happen, so 8 million visitors to the High Line last year, 5 billion real estate investment. So after Giuliani wanted to tear it down, it became the hot real estate investment in New York. The prices for land there and for apartments now is really skyrocketed. Lots of new jobs, residential units, hotel rooms, new office space, and so forth. And with that came a lot of complaints from New Yorkers that somehow the High Line was it was getting overdeveloped too quickly. And this is from 2007. It says, how a park built on a junk heap became a glamorous symbol of everything you love and hate about the new New York. So already New Yorkers were saying, this is like too much, too fast in terms of the catalytic action of the High Line. And in fact, the High Line has had this halo effect on property. So it's the park, and it's every square inch is now accounted for, or if it's not built on, it will be built on. It's been traded and continuously flipped sites. And if we were smart, we would have bought property there. We didn't think that way at that time. But all of this growth in this part of the city, including Hudson Yards, has been incredibly transformative, and for the good, and maybe like too much, too growth, not necessarily so good. And there are winners and losers to all of this. This self-reflection brought about a kind of post-occupancy way of thinking about, what is this site? We were there right from 2004. It was kind of a sea of open parking lots. Now it's all built up. And we decided that, in this case, I sort of decided I needed to find a way of working out a post-occupancy problem of the losers and the winners of this site. And decided to, because our studio also does experimental work. We do installations, we do work across all media, including performance. And I decided that it would be great to do a High Line opera, an opera on the park, like literally on the park. And it would be a mile long. Actually, it ended up being 1.5 miles long, so this is underselling it, and called a biography of 7 o'clock. And so this was to be a reflection of what a kind of meditation on the post-industrial city. It happened here, but it happened in many other cities around the world. And it's about the speed of transformation from a place of production to a place of consumption. And there's no place that, for me, better exemplifies this sort of issue of decay, rebirth, than the High Line. And it's filled with nostalgia for irretrievable past, but also apprehension about a kind of uncertain future. So this, and I just want to call out a biography of 7 o'clock. It turns out to be really important. So if you look at the left, that's what it was. On the right is what it's becoming, and it's become. And still the High Line is great, and I'm very, very proud of it. But it gives one pause to think about this rapid transformation that happened in really like 15 years or less. So the opera, and I don't really like opera, so it was a way of dealing with thinking about a new form, and to bring the opera off the stage, off of the Met stage, let's say, onto public space. So I invited David Lang to help me think this through, and we evolved this piece called the Mile Long Opera that was effectively, it started at Gansevoort Street all the way to the south and went all the way around Hudson Yards to 34th Street and ended at the end. The premise was that 1,000 singers would be spread out all along the park, and the public would meander through them, promenade through them, and sort of graze. And so the sound and the music was written in such a way, in bits and pieces, that as you moved, you kind of mixed down the sound, and you could hear the different parts of it at the pace that you wanted. David Lang on the left, Claudia Rankin, and Ann Carson were the two writers that we got involved, one in writing for the sung text and one for the spoken text. So 7 o'clock is a kind of great common idea. It's like something that we associate with family coming home at 7 o'clock. It's when dad comes home from work. It's when dinner is served. Well, it used to be like that, in the modern family. Well, people sit around and look at their devices, but actually 7 o'clock doesn't even mean being with the family. And 7 o'clock means different things to different cultures, to people of different age groups. And what we were really interested in was the 7 o'clock is the hour in which the opera would start every night in a succession of 7 nights. But it would be a real-time reflection of what 7 o'clock means. And for Claudia Rankin and Ann Carson, who had spent a lot of time interviewing people of New York, they sort of like brought the essence of some of those interviews with their own poetry into the lyrics of the piece. So it's all about that magic hour. And here are some shots from, so all the singers are dispersed in different kinds of arrangements. You'll see they're all wearing these baseball caps with luminescent visors, which everyone had their own individual spotlight. But what was so unusual about this was the sort of human interaction with every singer. So every audience member coming up, 3,000 a night, would interact with each of 1,000 singers, even for a couple of seconds at a time, sometimes for a couple of minutes at a time, in this very personal sort of experience where the fourth wall is more than broken. Along the way, we also took sites along the way. This is the standard where that guy was exposing himself. We took some sites and we made installations there, and it's always around cleaning windows. That's that very thin interface between public and private space that was so interesting. So it's throughout the whole mile and a half that you see those window washers in different sites. Some of the other characters, sometimes slightly elevated, but very much with a consciousness of the public there, looking into their eyes, the singers, 1,000 of them, and there were like really as diverse New Yorkers as you can find, like really a cross-section of the population. And sometimes very, very shy. There were 750 singers from 40 choirs from around New York, and 250 professional singers sprinkled throughout. And these are just some of the shots and the characters. That's a Zaha Hadid condo. There's a special window cleaning ritual on that one. And then around the very end, and I'm going to play a little of it. Moment just before night, the twilight tense environments. Sometimes it was with traffic, sometimes with crickets.
No perfect star around you anymore. No place to get your shoes.
These singers were below your feet.
The river should have gone along the dust or the beach. Towel the river. They all want what they want, but they want you not to have it. Punch, crooks, sharks, rush hour. The thing about the city,
So
there's a level of anger.
I'm going to, and that's all I'm going to show on that. That was, I have to say that now I'm a huge proponent of doing things you're unqualified to do. Doing that, it was so hard because there was no institution behind us. We had to do everything. Our studio was basically involved in everything from PR to production. We hired production people, and we just made this 1,000 singer opera happen, raised all the money, and anyway, it was incredibly successful for those nights. One of the most rewarding things I've ever done. There was, I think it was the week of the Kavanaugh hearings, and I think that there was a kind of rawness in the air. And this project brought this kind of strange sense of citizenship in this collective event that people shared in the beginning of October in this sort of, it never rained, and it was quite beautiful. And it was all about thinking about the space that we were in. Okay, so that brings me to Hudson Yards, and I'm going to race through. I know I'm kind of running late on time. Is that bad? Hurry up? Hurry up. Okay, this last project is kind of where I'm leading to, which is in Hudson Yards. There was a piece of property that was 21,000 square feet. And here you can see the High Line, the whole High Line, and this far west side, an area that the city is now developing broadly, and Hudson Yards right where the active train yard is with like 38 tracks. So finally, after many years, Hudson Yards is being developed. But the city saved that one piece of property, 21,000 square feet, for a cultural facility. They had no idea what it was going to be, and they sent out this RFP to whoever wanted to propose a facility, which this was in 2008. It was at the height of the recession, and it was really hard out there. Like, nobody was thinking about making new cultural institutions. And we responded like kind of crazy. And David Rockwell, our colleague and partner at the beginning of this project, we responded with sort of an idea about what New York might need. There was a little manifesto written. This is the site. It's actually one spot of terra firma, ultimately related, is doing the huge development and building a big platform, or built a big platform with already large towers on the east side. That's going to happen on the west side as well. But this is the question. Today there are over 1,200 cultural institutions in New York City, and the question is, why should there be one more? Who needs another cultural institution? And the sort of our own response was that there's nothing in New York that actually brings the disciplines together. We have great museums and galleries, we have theaters, we have performance spaces of all kinds, concert spaces, theater spaces, dance spaces, but there's no purpose-built facility that brings everything under one roof. And when we think about culture into the future, arts into the future, what does that future look like? How are artists going to be, what are they going to be working with? What kind of spaces would they need? The answer is, we don't know. Like, that's the only answer one could give. And maybe the response should be that the structure should have the flexibility to be able to take lots of different things, but typically flexible things are generic, like big loft spaces are typically generic. Beautiful, but and much loved by artists. But how do you build from scratch something that could be lovable from the beginning, that could be flexible, and have an identity to it that could contribute to the culture of architecture, and let artists sort of script it? How about something that's scalable, that could change scale if you need a small space or if you need a giant space? You could produce those spaces. And New York doesn't have an indoor-outdoor cultural institution. There's outdoor spaces, but and most cultural institutions really don't have an outside space. So we decided to put all this together. The one sort of model from history that we sort of came to was Cedric Price's Fun Palace. And mostly because it was a building that was conceived for a future that was unknowable and specifically designed to be an architecture of infrastructure. And that stuck with me, that notion of an architecture of infrastructure. What will artists need in the future? Well, they'll need electricity, until we make it remote, they'll need to plug into something. Space, conditioned space, be able to have light control and sound control, and be able to have loading capacity. Those are like the main things that artists in the future would need. Other than that, technology will change all the time. You need a flexible infrastructure. So this was after a bunch of designs and strategies. Ultimately, that footprint, that 21,000 square feet, is where you see the orange, that orange part. The ochre part is the idea of expanding the footprint, which was too small for the kind of cultural entity that we wanted to make. One with a big space. So basically the idea is, and it's really it's right on the High Line, right on the edge of the High Line, where the High Line goes west. And so on that 21,000 square feet is a stack of large span column-free galleries that could be used for multi-purposes, could be used for theater or exhibitions, whatever. And then on top of it is this telescoping outer shell. When it's deployed, it basically shelters and conditions the space, like an interior space, of the second, like doubling the footprint. So a very, very large void of a space for extra large exhibitions, performances, events. But when it's not needed, it nests back on the building, so you don't need to heat it and cool it when you don't need it. It's very sustainable. And you basically open up a large open public space where you can have other cultural events in the open air. That's the idea. So we would use gantry crane technology for this. And basically it's adapting a known system. It's very familiar at shipyards. And this was one of our early models. That's the way that we explain things to like, when we start to explain this to Mayor Bloomberg, a moving building, it does that well. And we made, for the longest time, and this is really maybe a part that I want to underscore, that for from 2008 till about 2011, we're basically evolving this with this project. We were selected for the project. We're evolving this in DS+R studio. And we had to prove it. We made a feasibility study, we brought in engineers, and we developed it with just under the aegis of the Hudson Yards Development Corporation, which is a little offshoot from the city. and basically was there to protect public space, but really had very little authority. But they were saying, keep going, keep going. Little did we know that Kate Levin, the commissioner of Cultural Affairs, was really like a champion of the project, and Dan Doctorow, who was deputy mayor and then went into the private sector running Bloomberg's company. So he was like silent, but he was for the project. But we were developing this with really, there was no institution and there was really no money. You know, we were fronting our own fees and developing it. Anyway, fast forward in 2011, we make a presentation to Mayor Bloomberg and a whole coterie of commissioners. We were told that Bloomberg had a 10-minute attention span to make it quick, and an hour and a half later, we're still talking about the project. He's asking lots of questions, and then he says, "What's your business plan?" And then we thought, oh, yes. You know, we had a kind of architect's business plan. It didn't really exactly work, and then we started to bring in people that knew what they were doing, and the project evolved. The city really got more involved, and it was, there were a couple of gifts from the city before the last term of Bloomberg was up, and then the culture that was called the Culture Shed at the beginning became a non-for-profit, and that's when we got our first contract with an entity called the Culture Shed, which we named, by the way. And I want to fast forward for a moment to 2014, where the artistic director was selected, Alex Poots, brilliant artistic director and CEO, and his first act was extracting the word culture from Culture Shed to just be the shed. Anyway, for all of you architects out there, it's just two different types of structure. It's a regular steel frame, and then there's the shell that rests on 6 points, basically 8 wheels. There's a double wheel on the front. So all the loads come down onto those wheels, onto tracks. And one of the big ideas here was that this giant space would be a very large footprint theatrical deck. So it's all strong points. You could hang anything, you could fly anything from there, and the audience shares the space of the performers and the sets and everything. So it's being in one large space without a stage, totally transformable when it's deployed. And so there's that cross-section through the truss, so you needed that depth to make the span, and in that depth you can get humans in there, and that could have machines and basically the whole theatrical setup. This is from an early digital model. The building is basically all muscle, no fat, so it's all structure and ductwork, and what you see, these forms that are basically back-to-back have a slot in between for blackout shades, and covered with ETFE pillows, which is basically low-pressure Teflon-based product. Okay, so there's one more thing that happened. We were asked, and actually David Rockwell as well was asked, if we would consider building the building next door on the footprint that was just adjacent, that was part of the commercial development. And at first we said, we actually, no, that's not really in our wheelhouse. And then we thought, well, you know, why not try to do a residential tower? We wanted to, you know, there were a couple of things. We wanted a good neighbor. So, you know, we could trust ourselves, but, you know, we wouldn't trust others. So why not have a good neighbor? But also we could take advantage of being right next to the other building that we're responsible for. So as it turned out, we were able to, through like clever negotiations between the city, Related, and the Shed and us, to negotiate for the lower 10 floors of the bottom of the tower for the Shed. So we were able to put all of our back of house there, all of our offices, mechanicals, storage, and all support support function. So effectively, we tripled our site from the original site by taking this on. And the tower, I'm not going to talk a lot about the tower today, but it's a very basic and very, very simple idea. We wanted to get from a rectangular footprint of the city grid up to a cloverleaf at the top where there were expensive condos, and the building is basically a morph in between. So now we're looking at this series of, on the level of the High Line, 2 stack galleries. The third gallery is actually a theater. Above that, event space, and below that, a mezzanine with back of house, and the lobby and loading dock and all of that stuff. So we have multiple layers, and if you look off to the left, there are many more levels, and that's in the tower. That's all of our back of house. I'm going to show you these little short films of the way it works. So when the shed, I don't know if the sound is, anyway, the sound isn't working well, but there is on the 30th Street, which is just to the south of us, we have a proper 2 bays of loading dock. But the street just to the north of us, it's a semi-private street. It's sloped, and it comes all the way up to the level of the plaza, of the deck. So you could drive a truck up, you could drive it, we have these large guillotine doors of the shed, and you can raise the doors, and you could drive a truck right in there, you could unload, and you could see some of the characters above. So pretty much you can do anything there. So this is just kind of, this doesn't weigh anything, but you could make the space feel small and have this sort of extension, because we have operable walls on the first couple of levels of the fixed building, and then we could black out, we can have film or any other kinds of events, concerts. Oh, sound. Okay. And this is now from the High Line, from the south, these large guillotine doors that open, and just a very, very large space, operable walls to make a very large extended footprint of about 30,000 square feet. And it could be indoor, outdoor. It takes 5 minutes to deploy the shed, and it takes the horsepower of 1 Prius engine. So it's extremely economical. Okay. And the kinetics is very simple. It's just wheels, steel wheels over tracks like a train. And there is a rack and pinion system at the very top. So the motors are, that add up to about 170 horsepower, I think, altogether, that drives the whole thing, and it's silent. Those are the wheels, and then this is one wheel being forged. The steel was done in Italy. Found a wonderful manufacturer, a family operation that does large-scale infrastructure projects like Panama Canal locks and things like that. So here's a wheel being now set on site, and these are the motors. You could see the hand of a person, how it just takes so little, with mechanical advantage to move an 8 million pound building. And you can operate it from your belt. So, and this is, so Iwan Bond took some really beautiful shots of this in construction. This is in the steel yard in Italy where it was being dry fit together. You could see the scale of one human there. And they just did, there's a lot of curves and nodes, and this was developed in the studio with software that we could really plan every little bit and piece and was done in old-fashioned and newfangled ways. So this is in construction. And this is actually the first deployment without the skin. With the skin, we have radiant heat and we have forced air, so we can basically, where the doors are down, we could set the temperature and have real, comfort in the middle of the winter. And when she glides, she's very quiet. And so this was when we were starting to test, and now we're going to actually put it into motion this summer. So going a little bit forward. Oh, this was product placement. It's from the Mile Long Opera. When we passed by the wheels of the shed, we didn't have any glass to clean at the time, so we were cleaning the wheels. Okay. So this is the view into the shed from a higher level. And this incredible choreography of cranes that was happening just in the last. So the shed, sort of fast forward, it opened in April. So we're very young. Alex Poots became, and I have to just also say that Dan Doctoroff, who was there at the very, very beginning of the project, really was the first client that we had, but we were at the client's table with the client, making up the program because there was no institution, there was no user. Until Alex came in 2014, he arrived in 15, and we started to adapt certain things to Alex's requests because it was like it tipped more to visual arts, he tipped it more to performing arts. And so acoustic issues became very, very important. And so the building underwent some change with him. And he hired a staff between 2015 and now of 100 people that run the shed. So there's something incredible in all this story, which is the project started with no institution, with just an idea, a site that was called cultural entity or cultural facility, and it ended up with an architect's idea of a very particular kind of building with a very particular idea about arts into the future that happened to mesh with this creative director, artistic director that is staging, fantastic things now. And it's a story that is probably, this will never happen again in our lives, but it was based on this hunch about a kind of space on demand, where we live in cities and cities are congested, we don't have a lot of space, we don't have a lot of public open space, why not share it part of the time? So this startup was the result of a kind of opportunism, the growth and the expansion into these different sites that happened just because we were sort of stealthy and there and opportunistic. And we said, why not, expand the footprint? Why not make public programming and so forth? So Dan Doctoroff was incredibly pioneering. He developed a fantastic board, again, from nothing. Usually cultural institutions don't come out of nowhere. It's usually out of an expansion of an existing institution. In this case, it was brand new, and all the money was raised, still a little short, but almost all, and with this facility that's already operating. So, and there was something really fantastic about the city saving the space for culture and us sort of stepping up and being at the right place at the right time, being really lucky. And advocating for culture, and that's the most important thing, preserve the footprint for cultural use and as well for public use. This is some of the early programming, Reich Richter Part, two great contemporary composers and great painter, and just some of the early programs that happened last month, Norma Jean Baker of Troy. This is with Renee Fleming and Ben Whishaw, a great British actor. And this was written by Anne Carson, who is also the writer for Mile Long Opera. The theater on top, collapsible seats, totally open black box theater. You can do anything you want in there. That's Ben becoming Marilyn Monroe, slowly. And this was a program called Soundtrack of America. And this was where the shed opened. Alex is on the far right. And we have Steve McQueen and Quincy Jones. And Marilyn McCann, I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing her name, but a historian of African American music. And they developed a program of 5 consecutive concerts of the history, the pedigree of African American music. And it was really, really brilliant by young, and these were all unknowns, 5 nights of and every night was different, of unknown, emerging talent, and incredible diversity. And each had to trace a little bit of their heritage, and their heritage of the heritage of the heritage back through African American music. And this is from the website. This is actually from the first performance. And you could see the upper gallery is partitioned off and it becomes a balcony and this is standing room for the first performances. Everyone was dancing and standing, and it was really this great spectacular space with all this stuff going on. And then last month was Bjork, and it was like a spectacle in the old-fashioned sense of spectacle. The whole space was used. And this is the way Alex likes to mix it up. It's like pop culture, high culture are collapsed, and we have and artists like Bjork doing sort of wild shows, and as well as exhibitions in the galleries. But any of these spaces could be used in any way. Oh, there she is. And this is what's on now. This is a kung fu dance performance, a musical, and some final shots of the shed. And I guess in closing, maybe I'll just say that this is just a part of what we do. We're doing work different parts of the world right now, and other cultural projects and other institutional projects, and also some commercial projects. But this is what brings all of this together is really sort of like the footprint of what we hope to leave, is the possibility of doing a cultural project from scratch, a park, for different, so the cultural institution was ultimately for the city that became a non-for-profit. The park was for the city of New York. The tower was for a commercial client, and the opera was for ourselves as clients. So, I have hope that it's possible to not only receive programs and ideas from the past and just tinker with them and adjust and adapt, but it's possible to bring new things to the table and expand the agency of the architect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was really incredible. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rebecca Johnson. I'm Executive Director of the Center for Architecture and Design in AIA Philadelphia. This is by far one of my favorite nights of the year, and Liz, you definitely did not disappoint. That was incredible. This evening event is a really important part of the work that we do all year long with K through 12 education, as well as Design Philadelphia and exhibitions and competitions. And it really couldn't happen without our sponsors and our volunteers. and all the work that we do. And so it's really great to have a night like this where we just are inspired by the power of architecture in our communities. So I'd like to thank our sponsors one more time. Thank you so much to our presenting sponsor, Gattuso Development Partners, to MIS Capital, Clemens Construction, Milburn Macris, Rockwell Group, and all of our ESTRIC level sponsors. But in addition, I really need to thank the man that makes this evening happen, our chair of our Kahn committee, Bill McDowell. Bill, thank you so much for your leadership. Robert Ivy, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It was a joy to have us here. We're celebrating our 150th year of a chapter, lots of fun things, and it was special for you to be here, so thank you very much. The night wouldn't happen without my amazing associate director, David Bender. He is behind the scenes making it all work so that we look good, so thank you very much, David. I want to also thank your team at Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro. Christine and Jeff were amazing, great to work with, and it was a pleasure. Thank you very much to DS+R for the time in your busy schedule to be here. I'm so happy that Liz and Ben are here tonight. And with that, I'm going to have you join us this stage and introduce. You can come both up, and we'll give you a reward. I want to introduce the chair of the Center for Architecture and Design Board, Rich Davies.
Good evening. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that two of the principal goals of the center are to champion thoughtful design and to connect the design community with the general public through an acknowledgement of that thoughtful design. And you can see why conferring this award in this way really wonderfully advances those goals. And so it's a real privilege and a pleasure for me on behalf of the Center for Architecture and Design to present you with the Louis I. Kahn Memorial Award, congratulating you for your wonderfully thoughtful architecture that combines the design world with the general public. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. Have a good night.